Okay, in this video we're going to look at expanding quadratics. Now, when you're asked to expand a quadratic, it's going to be given in the form of two brackets. At the front of each bracket you're going to have a letter, and that letter is usually x. The second part of each bracket is normally a number that's added on or taken away. So in this example we're going to use x minus 4 as our first bracket and x plus 7 as our second bracket. Now I'm going to run through three of the main ways of thinking about how to expand this quadratic, and I'm actually going to show you that two of the ways essentially do exactly the same thing with two different ways of thinking about it. I'll come to those after we've dealt with the first method. The first method is called eyebrows and chins. Okay, so what you do is you draw eyebrows on top of the brackets and you draw some double chins, a double chin underneath the brackets. Now each of these lines represents a multiplication that you're going to have to do. So you can see you've got to do 4 multiplications in order to expand out these brackets. So this line up here, this first eyebrow, just a multiplication. All we're going to do is we're going to multiply x by x. So that's going to give us x squared. And then the second eyebrow, you can see we're going to do minus 4 multiplied by positive 7. Now if you struggle with multiplying negatives or dealing with negatives at all, especially when you're multiplying, a great way of handling it is to deal with the symbol first. So you can think, okay, well I've got a negative number times by a positive number. What's that going to give me? Well, that's going to give me a negative number, and then you can just deal with the numbers themselves. So you've got 4 times by 7, which is 28. Okay, now on to the first of the chins. You've got minus 4 times by x. Again, if you want to, deal with the symbol first. So you've got a negative term times by a positive term. This again is going to be negative. And now you've got 4 times by x, which is 4x. And then the final multiplication, the second chin down here, we've got x times by 7. Both of them are positive, so it's going to be positive 7x. Okay. So this is the expand part of the question. Now often with expanding quadratics, it'll ask you to expand and simplify. So you've got to do one more step really in order to get all the marks. And the simplification you've got to do is you've got to tidy the two x parts into one. So there's nothing you can do with the x squared, that's going to stay as x squared, and there's nothing you can do with a number. Sometimes when people are simplifying quadratics, they think that the x squared can tidy somehow with the x parts. That's simply not possible when you're adding or subtracting these different parts, these different terms away from one another. So because it's x squared and we've got minus 4x plus 7x, there's nothing we can do to tidy the x squareds and the x's into one another. So the x squared is going to stay exactly as it is. And I'm going to write the minus 28 also staying as it is, but I'm going to write that at the end, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Let's tidy these two terms into one. So you've got minus 4x plus 7x. So again, dealing with negatives, again, it can be a bit confusing. A couple of ways of thinking about this. One way to think about it is to think about it on a number line. Okay, so we're starting at minus 4, and we don't really need to think about the x's. We can just consider it as minus 4, and we're adding on 7. So we're going up the number line, 7. So that's going to bring us out at positive 3. Okay, so this is going to be positive 3x. Another way of thinking about it is you never be afraid to swap these terms around. If you're adding and subtracting terms from one another, you don't have to keep the order that they present you with. You can swap them around as long as you keep the symbol associated with each term with that term. So obviously this 4x is negative here, so you've got to keep the negative with that 4x, and the 7x is positive. So if we swap these around, I can write the 7x first, which is positive, and then I can write minus 4x. And sometimes that's a nicer way of representing it, and it's easy to see what result we're going to get. 7x minus 4x is clearly going to give us 3x, whereas having the negative first can sometimes be a little confusing. Now, why did I leave a space and write the 3x here before the minus 28? Well, when we write quadratics, there's a tradition, a kind of standard that we stick to, where we write our quadratic in what we call descending powers of x. And all that means is you write the highest power of x first, followed by the next highest, followed by the next highest. So this is x squared here. So this is the highest power we have of x. So this this part goes first, this term goes first. Now we've just got an x term, x to the power 1, you can think about it, so this goes next. And then we've got our number with no power of x, so that goes last. This is the way that you should present your quadratic result, with your x squared, then your x's, then your number. Okay, now I'm going to show you the second and third method for expanding out quadratics. Now, these methods actually do exactly the same thing, but they're different ways of thinking about it, different ways of remembering it. So whichever way you find more comfortable, whichever way you're going to remember more, that's absolutely fine, but they do exactly the same thing. The first of these methods I'm going to talk about is the half-moon method. And what we do is we draw two lines from the first x to both parts of the second bracket. And then we do the same thing underneath for the number in the first bracket, so in this case from the 4, and we're going to draw lines to both parts again of the second bracket. And what you get is you get this kind of half-moon kind of shape going all the way around, which is why we call it the half-moon method. Again, each of these lines is just representing a multiplication. So this long part on top, this is just x times by 7, which would get us 7x, which we can see we got in the first case as well. So another way of thinking about this half-moon method that doesn't actually put lines on the brackets is what's known as the FOIL method. So the FOIL method, F-O-I-L, it's just an acronym that gives us a way of remembering all the different multiplications we have to do. So the F stands for first, so that means you just simply multiply the first of each bracket, so the x times the x at the first part of each bracket. The O stands for outside, so we multiply the outside parts of each bracket, so the x and the 7. The I stands for the inside, obviously the inside parts of both brackets, -4 and the x here. And then the L stands for last, so the last parts of each bracket gets multiplied together. Now, this actually gives you exactly the same order that we're going to do when we do the half-moon method. But as you can see, the half-moon method has actually got lines on our brackets, which some people find helpful because they can kind of cross them off as they go and mark a line through them to say that they've done that multiplication. If you prefer this method, this FOIL method though, without lines on your brackets, that's absolutely fine as well. But both of these will give you exactly the same expansion when you do it. Okay, so running through these methods, when we do the half-moon method, always stick, when we start on, we're going to start on the top and then move down to the bottom, but always start with the shorter of the two lines. So we're going to do x times x to begin with, which is x squared. Then we're going to do the longer line on top, which is x times by 7. Again, both are positive, so it's going to be plus 7x. Then we're going to move down to the bottom, and again, we're going to do the shorter of the two lines first. So we've got -4 times by x. So that's going to give us -4x. Again, if you want to think about the negative first, deal with the symbols first. You've got a minus term times by a positive term. Forget what they are. That's always going to give you a negative term. So you can put the minus in, and then you can say, right, what's 4 times x? Well, that's just 4x. And then the second line, the longer of the lines on the bottom, we do -4 times by 7, and as we've already seen, that's going to give us -28. So again, a minus term times by a positive term will always give us a negative, and then we can just deal with the numbers themselves. So 4 times 7 is 28. Okay, so that's the expanded part. Now we've got to simplify it. Again, we're just going to simplify our x terms, okay, these parts in the middle. So the x squared is going to stay the same. There's nothing we can do with that. And the -28 is going to stay the same. There's nothing we can do with that. And we're just going to have 7x minus 4x, which is all we've seen gives us positive 3x. So you can see that this result is exactly the same result as the one we got from the method before, the eyebrows and chins method. And it's exactly the same as we would get if we applied FOIL. We've done exactly the same thing here. Now, if you're not sure which method to go with, I would advise this half-moon method, because for the simple reason, the result that you get is presented in the order that you need it, with your x squared parts first, then your x parts, then your number. And so you can see you don't need to do any shuffling around to write it in descending powers of x with your x squared, then your x's, then your number. It spits it out in this order. If you come back to the eyebrows and chins method, you remember we had to rearrange the order. It spat out this result, but it kind of jumbled up the parts, and so we needed to swap around the x part and the number in order to write it in the correct order. If you're perfectly comfortable doing this, swapping these parts around, and you find the eyebrows and chins method easier to remember, then absolutely use that. All of these methods will give you the correct answer. They'll all give you exactly the same answer. Of course, this method just requires you to do a bit of swapping around at the end, whereas to reiterate, the half moon method or the FOIL method actually spits out your answer in exactly the right order, and so you don't need to do any swapping around at the end. So it's completely up to you which one of these methods you decide to use. Okay, so that's Expanding Quadratics, there's nothing more to it. If you found this video helpful, please consider dropping it a like. I'm going to be doing lots more of these types of videos. I'm going to be covering the whole Maths GCSE syllabus as well as the whole science syllabus, and so I'm going to be rolling out lots of videos to cover all these types of topics. So if you want to stay updated with all these types of topics, consider subscribing to my channel. Leave any comments of any videos that you want to see sooner rather than later. I'm going to be rolling it out in an order that I think is sensible and hitting those kind of very popular topics first. But if there's something you're struggling with and you want to see a video within 24 hours, drop a comment in one of the videos and I'll get that video done for you as soon as possible.